One of the keys to writing good, successful programs is to be very consistent with all the names that you give the various objects, such as the controls that you place on the form. There are some Visual Basic rules that you need to be aware of. First, however, if I create a label by placing it on the form, the property I am referring to here is the name property. The rules that I will discuss only apply to the name property and not, for example, to the caption. The default name that Visual Basic gives to a label is label 1, and then for another label will be label 2, and so forth. You, the programmer, get to make up your own name for this control. However, when you select a name for this object, Visual Basic requires the name to begin with a letter. The name can be up to 40 characters in length and may contain other letters, digits, and the underscore. An object name cannot include a space or a special character such as an exclamation mark or a hyphen. Remember, this applies to the name property, not, for example, the caption property. In the caption property, you're allowed to use space and special characters. But back to the name property. We have seen that I used a prefix for a label such as LBL and then followed with a meaningful name. All the controls that you have available in Visual Basic have an industry-wide naming convention, and I'll be using these conventions throughout this course. These conventions make projects much easier to work with in the long run. If you're consistent with the naming of your controls, then your code is no longer a mystery as to what that particular control is referring to. I have a simple program that will demonstrate some of the more commonly used controls and their suggested prefixes. As we have seen, a label has a suggested prefix of LBL. Command buttons have a suggested prefix of CMD. Of course, each one of these prefixes should be followed by a more meaningful name which indicates this control's purpose. A text box, which is used for user input, has a prefix of TXT. Option buttons will have the prefix of OPT. A checkbox will have a prefix of CHK, and a frame will have a prefix of FRA. Now, there are other controls in the toolbox, but these are the ones we'll be using frequently in the projects to come. Some general comments about these prefixes. You should always begin the name with this lowercase three-letter prefix. Lowercase simply to make that different than the rest of the name of the control. For example, LBL message, I would capitalize the M in message simply to make it easy to read. Visual Basic is not a case-sensitive language, which means you can type these in lowercase, uppercase, or any mixture. But again, the industry-wide naming convention says to make this a lowercase prefix and then to capitalize the first character of the name following the prefix. Remember, there is no space after the prefix and the rest of the name. And finally, when should you really rename controls? Well, the answer to that is anytime a control is going to be used in code, it should be given a name created by the programmer. And we will see some projects very soon which will demonstrate when you should name labels or controls in general for that matter, and when you do not need to name controls.